joyful play,
purposeful work,
rugged outdoor living,
our camps and conservation efforts,
teach timeless skills,
and kindle the spirit within.
Farm and wilderness.
Farm and wilderness.
Farm and wilderness. Welcome back, everyone, to the Farm and Wilderness podcast. My name is W, and I'm the Director of Camps and Director of Camp Timberlake here at Farm and Wilderness. I am excited to present this episode, and it's one of our more unusual ones so far. I'll be talking to Chris Moncrief, former camper, Timberlake staffer, and now consultant to F&W. I met Chris my very first summer in 2007. He was in his last year as a camper, and I was in my first year as a staff member. We have stayed in contact ever since, and him and I have had countless long, wandering conversations about life, camp, careers, all of it. He's one of those close friends that you might not see often, but when you do, it feels like you've never parted. And that feels like really the definition of a camp friend. This conversation is a version of one of those conversations. We'll start in a pretty predictable place. Chris talks about how he found camp, how he chose to stay at camp, and how he found his way back on staff. In the second half of this conversation, that's where we'll go in a totally different path compared to the other episodes. We're going to talk about some deep concepts in the second half. He'll share what he's doing now, and I really see this incredible through line of intentionality that connects his experience as a camper here at F&W all the way to the design work that he's doing now. What struck me about the conversation is two things. One, we explore what it means as a staff member to have an impact at camp and leave your mark, and to have folks not remember that you were the one that did it, even a couple years later. At a place like F&W and summer camps, there are so many intentional things that we do, and it can feel like that's just the air we breathe, but actually each of those things was chosen, designed, created, implemented by someone at some point. Him and I have both ruminated on us being what I call T-elders, to play on Timberlakers, T-elders who've been around for a while and around long enough where they might have implemented something at camp and folks don't necessarily know that they were the one that did it, or that they don't even know who they are. The second thing that strikes me about this is at the very, very end, and it's the final call to action. And Chris will talk pretty beautifully about both the magic of camp and the existential threats to summer camp. Few words to explain that you'll hear us use before we jump in. Support staff is the F&W name for our camp leadership staff at each camp. Think the assistant director, program director, lodge heads, etc. Chris will mention the Anything is Possible book, and it's a book at Timberlake we pull out after silent meeting. We write down a few imaginative ideas that campers will have, and it also now acts as a diary for the day that the person holding it fills out. And then lastly, he'll say the word J1, and we haven't used that term in a while, but J1 is describing the Spark program. J1 was the name before we used the Spark program, and those programs are no longer happening. They were the 10-day introductory experience for our campers. This is a long episode, but I think it lands so well at the end, and I think it's worth the longer listen. And with that, my conversation with Chris on intentionality, impact, and design. Chris, I really appreciate you being here. It's really great to chat with you. You have a long kind of storied history with Farm and Wilderness. First off, tell us, what is your connection to Farm and Wilderness?
I was a camper from 2002 to 2007. Then I was a staff member from 2016 to 2019. And now I'm working as a program advisor and consultant, and I've been doing that since 2021.
We're going to get into a bunch of those. And so I want to start with the question that I usually start with most people, is just how did you find Farm and Wilderness?
That's always the story. Always the story. Direct answer is $11.99. Thank you so much. The context is that so my mom and I had just spent our first year being in the homeless, in the shelter system in New York City. In New York City, better than most, but still really crappy, right? You kind of have these family shelters that are set up to essentially, I think in their best attempt at like create the conditions that are going to allow for a family to find a home and do what they got to do on their own. But with that comes a lot of like kind of arbitrary rules that make it really difficult if you are a parent like my mom, who was just down on her luck, just didn't have the money or the funds at the time to continue paying rent in New York, which this was 25 years ago, still a crazy thing there then. And so she worked, and she had worked out like this like masterful, like maximizing of my time, because one of the rules was that I could not be left alone in the house for any amount of time. And when you think about it, I was 10 or 11. It's actually not uncommon for a 10-year-old to be in the house for a couple hours, come home from school, right? But like those are the things that you couldn't figure out, you couldn't manage if you were living in the shelter. And so my mom was like, great, we got through the first year. I was in a school, had me in school from like 7 to 7 on school on Saturdays, like this whole thing. But when the summer was coming up, she was kind of at an impasse, because it was like, she still had to go to work and she couldn't leave me there. She wasn't about to pay anybody to hold me I'm not a grown child, but like I'm a big enough child that I don't need to be babysat all day by somebody for all that money. And she said, great, we're going to summer camp. So she's big and she's been living at that union forever, and went to a union rep and said, what do y'all got? Came back with a bunch of camps. Now, the other piece of context here is I had no interest in going away. The last time my mom had sent me away somewhere was to go stay with a relative. And when I came back, we were in the shelter. So I was like, absolutely not. You're not doing this again. I'm not leaving. And so she presented me with all the options. And I remember being like, thanks so much. No, I'm not going. And she kept nudging on it. Like, you need to pick a camp. And when you do the 1199 process, you have to go down and get interviewed. You have to be, there's a process wrapped into figuring out where you're going to go. And for all of them, I had been like, no, I'm not going. It doesn't matter. And I remember she gave me the options. At one point, it was like farm and wilderness, where the only thing that we knew about the camp was that the cabins didn't have 4 walls. Like, absolutely not. And then there was like a computer camp that sounded pretty cool for like the kinds of things that I was into as a kid. Like, that was my jam. Let's do it. But it was still no for me. And I think to spite me, she was like, all right, cool. Well, this is where you're going. She signed me up for Farm and Wilderness. She packed my bags. And the day that it was time to go, I still did not believe she was really going to make me leave. And she packed my bags. We go down to catch the bus. At this time, I start bawling. I'm like, absolutely not. Don't make me go. Part of it is like the frustration because I had lost and I was that kind of a kid. But also, it's like, I never been around that many white people before. Just like the bus would pick us up on, what is that? Like 34th and 8th, right across from the big post office. And I'm like, what is happening here? And seeing all these kids show up, some of them coming through in these like really nice cars or getting out of crazy Escalade. And I'm like, absolutely not. Don't send me. So I was nervous. I was afraid of going. And she hugged me, kissed me, and said goodbye. I'll talk to you when you get back. And I got on the bus and I bawled all the way up there. And I think it was actually Mojo, who was the first counselor who greeted me when I got off the bus. Actually, I know it was Mojo. Took my giant duffel bag back to my bunk. And it maybe took like, I don't know, a couple hours for me to be like, oh, this is pretty cool. Yeah, the waterfront. We're playing in like, I don't know, like Zip Zap Zop or whatever at the waterfront. But I think like that, your question was, when did I find F&W? I think I found it in the paperwork. Like, this is where you could go. Absolutely not. But I think I finally like felt like I was there. Like I had a place there, like in that first afternoon, just being like, yeah, this is going to be cool. Now, the other part of the story that I always have to tell when I tell this story is that because I was that kind of kid, again, not the greatest, but who I am who I am. I refused to write my mom the whole time. Like, she can't know that I'm having a great time here. And she was probably like having a fit and, having her own fit. I do remember at one point, partway through the session, like getting all like up in a tizzy and about wanting to see her or talk to her. I was worried about her. Really, I just missed her and was homesick and I hadn't talked to her. It was about the time that the camp had offered me an opportunity to stay for the second session. And she's going to hate that I'm telling this story. It's being documented. But they pulled me into the infirmary to call her. Like one of two places with a phone at the time. The infirmary, the back cave. They pulled me into the infirmary to call her. It's the first time she's hearing from me. And I'm like, Ma, they told me I could stay for another month. Can I stay? And she got real quiet. She hadn't heard from me. And she just goes, she said, I only want you to answer me in yes or no.
Her momness, yeah, turned on.
Definitely did. Mm-hmm. She goes, are you alone in the room right now? Like, no. Are they hurting you? No. She's like, you really want to stay? I'm having fun, I really like it here. I think camp was also, in a year that had been crazy, camp had been like we do the same thing every day. I have my own bunk, do my own things. Like, I'm good here. And I was able to be like a pretty big personality there. In a way that I did not, I think I came with it, but I don't know, something about camp just 10x everything. And I felt really good. And so she ultimately said yes, but she definitely made her way up there for Parents Weekend just to see what was going on and didn't get it, which was fine. But she saw that I was happy and that I was having a good time. And she actually made every effort she could after that to make sure that I could go.
How many summers were you there?
5 summers, 5 very full, very long summers. This might be too much information, but my school was like one of those no excuses New York City charter schools, just like how they get down. So we went, I always missed the last few days of school and the first few days of school because I was at camp. Because camp it was like 2 months, 2 and some change actually, because it was 2 full 4-week sessions and then a weekend. And I think the first session was even a little bit longer, maybe like a day or 2 longer. So I always missed the last couple of days of school, always missed the first couple of days of school. By like the 3rd summer, the school knew what was up. Chris is not going to be here. It's fine. But yeah, 5 full summers.
What was one of the highlights for you of those 5 summers? One of those moments that sticks with you?
Ooh. There's so many. Okay, one, probably getting my Pioneer. Just because, like, it felt like the universe conspired against me that summer.
What did you have to do to get the Pioneer? How did it conspire against you?
Well, like the one back then, I think it's different now, but back then, if you wanted to get your Pioneer, or your Pathfinder, but I was not motivated enough to do that. You had to have spent a decent amount of time at camp and you had to have gone deep in a lot of different places. And so over the 5 summers, I had gone deep in the waterfront. I came there as a kid, didn't know how to swim. And like the year I got my basic was probably another like big highlight for me. I had done my farm time. I loved to grow things. I remember my homesteader project. I think they actually just got rid of it a few years ago.
What was your project?
One of the sets of big swinging gates up in the, I guess they would have, at the time they were from the Artsmith field into the garden. Yeah, I think y'all just took those down.
Yeah, just the gates themselves were hanging out for a while with no fence.
Yeah.
In your honor.
Oh, right. Because it was for me. Right. But that last summer, I had not spent enough time doing the OLS stuff. So it was like all this stuff of like getting your Voyager and doing the like get lost hike. I did all of that in my last summer as a camper. And then I had to do my project. And so like it was fine. Like we had gotten through the first session. I was a super cool senior lodger. The first session didn't do a damn thing. Second session, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I get to work. I actually think the OLS said at the time was like, you're playing, you need to just finish this. And so I was getting all that done. And the last like week, my solo got pushed because of weather. So like now we're in this crunch. I'm also like working on the Fair Fire. The director at the time, he had done these like senior lodge, what were they called? I don't even know what they were called, but they were really cool days. Probably another highlight. Like we weren't doing anything crazy. He was like, grab the like, it's funny actually. Chris Lord took us up there to clear the limber gym. That's what it was. Is it the logging header is the one on this side? It's the limber gym that goes up past the pavilion. Yeah, he put it. It was raining. He was like, grab the tools. This is what Ranger's Cabin is doing today. And like we just cleared the limber gym all day. It was probably one of my favorite memories of camp. But like I was trying to do that and like work on the Fair Fire. And finish up my like solo and all that, and still had no plan, no vision, no nothing for a project. And like one of the days working on the Fair Fire, I just picked up a log the wrong way, and like crossing the later that afternoon, crossing the road past the trading post to go up for lunch, my back spasmed. And I like fell out on the road at the trading post. And I was a dramatic kid. I'm a dramatic person. So it's like all hell's breaking loose. And I wound up, they took me I had to go to Rutland and have it all checked out. Everything was fine for the most part, but they made me rest for 2 days. What? They would not let me do anything. And I remember it wound up getting down to the crunch fire. I wound up we redid all of the trips room. So we pulled everything out. We put a bunch of shelves in there. We repacked everything. I had to build a bunch of new shelves in there. Those shelves were not great shelves. They were not good shelves.
I don't think we still have them anymore.
I'd be surprised if you did. But I wound up, I missed banquet. I missed like all of the, what do you call it? Spy Night I was there for, but I didn't play. I just did the searching. And while they were doing Spy Night, I was working on my Pioneer project, doing an awful job at it. And then like at the end of banquet, kind of coming up to the upper lodge and getting my Pioneer and having the whole camp be like, oh yeah, we've been watching you struggle through this. Felt really good. It's kind of like a got you universe. You can't hold me back. But yeah, that's probably one of the biggest highlights. I do want to go back to that Chris Lord day was really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what about it. I've tried to replicate it and just like can't. But there was something about how he had convinced us that like it was almost like the fun of it wasn't in having fun. And he made us, we all like agreed to that. It was like, yeah, like we're going to do a bunch of work. But damn, that was a good day. It was a good day. And nothing about it should have been. It was raining. It was super muddy. We like had loppers and axes and fuddy buckers and whatever the hell else we needed. And we carried them of the Limber Gym in the rain and just worked on that trail for what felt like a full day. Now, I know that like camp memories are what they are, so it's probably like an afternoon activity, but it felt like a full day of work. And that just felt good. It was really good. And I remember like my boy at the time, Sam, he and I had a blast. Just like, you breaking that one? No, you breaking that? I'm moving that one? All right, cool. Oh, this Barack? Let's roll the rock. Oh, watch how we rolling the... Let's just like, all of those kinds of pieces, just doing stuff with other people and like having it be kind of hard. Felt really, really good.
When you think about your time as a camper, when did you know, or did you even know as a camper that you wanted to come back on staff?
I did not know at all. Maybe, yeah. I don't think I had imagined myself as a camp counselor.
So what brought you back?
I missed it. What did I miss? I was about to say I missed feeling like I was like a part of something really big. And I think that's true. But I don't know, I've been blessed enough in my life to have been continually a part of like really intense communities, starting with my school, thinking about Farm and Wilderness, thinking about my fraternity, thinking about places that I've worked after the fact. Like, I'm down for the weird. Like, let's get into it. And so I definitely know that I missed that from FNW, but I don't know what it was about FNW in particular that made me want to be back there. But I know that it was because I missed it. I was like, oh. And I remember so I graduated high school when I was 17, just because of where my birthday falls. And I tried to work that summer and got the curve. Like, nah. So you said, you're too young. You could not come. It was like, fine. And then the next summer, I think I thought I was doing I just did my first year of college. I need an internship, whatever nonsense that was. An internship that didn't really mean anything. So it wasn't until I was 19 that I actually showed back up at camp to work. But yeah, like, I don't think as a camper I could have seen it. I don't think I saw it as a camper. I think what I experienced as a camper was like, oh, those guys are cool. I like that counselor. I want to hang out with that counselor. I want that counselor to be my friend, like all of that kind of stuff. But I don't think I had the sense of, yeah, I'm going to come work here. I think even now, right, like the camp is much bigger now than what my experience of it was. And there's a designed transition that the older campers go through to feeling accountable for the camp in the execution of camp, which is different than how we were made to feel accountable for the camp. If you take that Chris Lord story as an example, it's like you're accountable for the space, so you do work for it. Like the senior lodgers are going to go clear this trail because people keep getting lost on it, or that kind of stuff. And then there's the whole leadership complex that shows up at summer camp. But I think now older campers are invited in a way that we weren't. I think in part because we need the help to make camp happen. But because of that, they have an opportunity to imagine themselves as staff in a way that I don't recall having, right? When I think about setting up for banquet, for instance, having senior lodgers doing that work now is not a thing that I remember being the case for my experience at camp. And TL is old. Maybe that happened at some point before I got there, but it wasn't a part of my experience of it. So I had no concept of what it meant to do that until I showed up as a counselor. Even things like camper led, the way that shows up now is different than how I remember it happening. So I guess in fewer words, I don't think I imagined myself as a staff member while I was a camper. I think it didn't happen until being a staff member was the only way that I could have come back and have that be in my life again.
I think it's really interesting. You talk about the designed growth that our campers are going through right now, right? That like leadership is a path at Timberlake. It's something we think about. And you're right that the pendulum has swung on leadership over the years. The director before me had very different views on what leadership meant. And I have very kind of strong views as well. And I'm assuming Chris Lloyd did too. And so I think it's interesting that no matter when a camper comes to Timberlake, there are these big rocks that they're going to experience, right? They're going to play the games. They're going to go fix trails. They're going to go be in the rain, things like that. But these little nuances over time are what people will remember when they compare Timberlake or not. Like, it's not the same. They're really talking about a specific thing, but actually maybe it really is the same in so many ways. It's still having that impact. And I think it's interesting that even as a camper, you weren't sure if you were to come back. You weren't thinking of yourself as coming back on staff, but there's something that you were missing. And so I want to come back. I want to build something as a staff member. As a staff member, what are you most proud of your time as a staff member?
That's a new question. What am I most proud of? I don't know. There's so many things that I'm proud of. There's also a lot of like things that I would have done differently. Yeah, most proud of is a tricky thing to say. A thing that I'm proud of. I think that like when I came back on staff as a 19-year-old, I did the very typical, y'all don't do it the way that I did it. And was very loud about that. And there were like really little things that grew to be really big things that I was able to like really force on. I think about like songs, like morning songs, which is just like it's a big deal. It's a big deal. But when I come back, it was weak. It just wasn't what I remembered it as. And again, I did not yet know what like camp goggles were and like how you remember things, because maybe actually it wasn't. I just really enjoyed it as a kid, and so it felt like everybody was having the time of their lives, and I was like, how could y'all not be doing this here? But I think the commitment that I made that first summer to being like songs is going to be lit, to the point where they were talking about things I would do differently. There are other parts of my day that were not as good because I was like, no, the 3-song lineup for tomorrow's songs is the most important thing we have to talk about right now. But that feels like something I'm really proud of. And I think what it did is, I don't know if this is actually true or not, if this is just what my experience of it was. But what it created was a model for how somebody who is not support staff might just own a thing. Just be like, nope, this is mine. Y'all glad you support that? I mean, I don't need that. I got my kids and I got songs. Let me know if you need something. I'll come make a request for some money to buy something, right? Like, and when I think, I like to think that summer and just like how hard I went there, and like, I only did it for a summer, really and a half. The second summer that I was there, we like shared that load a little bit more. But I think it was just a way to say, hey, you can be here and not be sitting at the table in the middle of the upper lodge, which they don't do anymore, but like sitting at that table in the middle of the upper lodge and still like meaningfully drive what the experience is here. Yeah. I think I played a part in creating that as a dynamic for other staff after the fact. Yeah. And then there's like a bunch of tiny little things. Like when this experience, when you spend a summer or two as a PD, you spend all day creating things, wondering if they'll last. And like there's things that folks are doing now that I'm like, yep, you're welcome. And like, those are like tiny points of pride, but those are like ego points. They're not meaningful to anyone other than me. But I'm like, yep, that's what you call that? Got it. And that kind of stuff feels good too. It's a way of, my last full summer working there was 2017, in 2018. think 2017.
They all run together. It's a while. Yep.
Also, who knows what life was between 2019 and 2022. But showing back up now, as we talk about this all the time, like as somebody who they have no idea who you are, there's a whole generation of staff working there who had a whole time as campers who have no idea, and seeing them do a thing and have no idea that and tell you how to do the thing. I have no idea that like you were the one that brought that. I think of like that Anything is Possible book is hilarious to me because it was a gimmick. And this, I think this summer was the first time I realized, oh, y'all like take that seriously. Like y'all do that every day. And I remember that really strange banquet where we tried to do something with Anything is Possible. So it was like a whole thing. But like that's a moment of pride too, to go, there is now like something built into the thisness of how they do camp that you sprinkled in. Like, here's my little touch. Go off and be what you will. It's probably the nature of being at a place like Farm and Wilderness. Like it's so old and like things are breaking all the time, right? It's like a part of you gotta fix the cabin. You gotta fix the bridge. You gotta fix the road. You gotta, we need a new thing for this, right? Like that's like how it works. It cycles. And to know that you built a thing that made it through a few cycles, or created a thing that made it through a few cycles, it's cool.
When you think of yourself as like a counselor working with kids, what made you a really good counselor?
There's like the big flashy stuff. I think that kids really enjoy the energy that I have. I think, and I can like go all day. We can do 20,000 rounds of whatever game. But I think the stuff that made me a good counselor was the boring stuff. So it's the routine. It's like, nope, get up, put your shoes over there. Like those kinds of things. Like when we sit down, we pass food this way, right? Like making sure that it was your turn. If it was your turn to scrape the plates, you're scraping the plates. Like that kind of stuff, I think, is what made me a good counselor, because it puts some of the, especially for the youngest campers, like it puts some of the things that could become moments of like stress or confusion kind of in the back of their minds. Right. So the question of like, do I know where my shoes are? Right. Because it's muddy outside or it's raining. It's like, yes, because every day your counselors go around and say, put your shoes over there. Right. Am I going to get enough food? Like, yes, because 3 times a day, your counselors are like, pass it to the left before make sure everybody sees it before you eat. Like that kind of stuff, I think, is what made me a good counselor. All the other stuff, like, like I tell jokes, I'm like down to be a child with them whenever it's possible, whenever it's allowed. But I think, and they won't remember the little stuff either. They won't remember the boring things. I do remember, I hadn't even been working the full summer. I think I was only there for a session, and I had been asked to take, again, the J1s on a trip with a co-counselor for whom it was his first time working at summer camp, being at a summer camp, being wherever. And we were hiking up the Ridge Trail. This was maybe 2017, 2016. It was before the Ridge Trail got Medicare. And there's this moment along the Ridge Trail, right when you hit the top of the Limber Gym, when you could cut over and now start walking the ridge. And the trail disappears. Like it was not there anymore. There were blazes every, few yards on trees, but the actual walking path had been overgrown. And so we start down this trail start down this non-trail trail and lose sight of the blazes. And there are some like really beautiful views up there. Like you can hit, I guess they're like ski slopes or former ski slopes, or like where the power lines are going down the side of the mountain. So you can see for really far if you get to the right spot. And after about an hour of realizing that we were lost, parked them there, kind of went on a quick look around to find the next trail. The next trail had found it, had come back. By the time I had come back, the kids were stressed and the co was stressed. Like, what are we going to do? And in the back of my mind, I'm like, we're a strong, 2 hours downhill from camp, right? It's nothing to be worried about. But to the point around things that they'll never remember, one of the things we did was start playing D&D just as we walked, and coming up with the most elaborate. There's a zombie apocalypse at TL. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10 to see if your superpowers work in the upper lodge kind of business. And that's enough to go okay, cool. We're playing a game now. We're still lost, but we're playing a game. And the kind of stress and anxiety of being outside and being kind of lost in the sauce goes away. And for them, they'll probably remember it as we took this long break with this really nice view. And then we got back on the trail and got home or got to the shelter for that first day. But those are that's kind of maybe the goal. The goal is to not actually let them see all the inner workings or the kind of gears that need to turn in the background to make sure that they're having the great time that they are. And they shouldn't see it. They won't remember that. But I think those are the kinds of things that I'm like, oh, this is what at least I think I did as a counselor.
You have been doing this a really long time and working with kids a really long time. And at camp, you had a magic touch with kids. They would follow you. They got excited to be around you. And you just talked about that part of your greatness as a counselor was your high energy, silly moments, but also the quieter moments. Where did that come from? How did you know how to be a good counselor?
I have an old colleague of mine who she was getting her doctorate in, I don't know, school evaluation or something that's really important but really boring. And she had this whole thing about schooling and the roles that schools were playing in raising kids. It was just it shouldn't be that hard, because for as long as there have been people, there have been children, and we have had to raise them and teach them things. And, I think simultaneously, making counseling feel like the most profound and influential thing you can do with your life, and also being and it was a summer gig. I think I learned to be a good counselor because there's something about it that is old, that is kind of innate in how you learn to be in community with people who are younger than you. There's stuff you can learn. There's we get training on the rules that you're supposed to follow, and here's a procedure that's really important. But I do think that there's part of it that is an innate instinct for how you care for people who are smaller than you, who are trying to do the things that you can do with ease, that want to be like you. And I think that the learning of how to become good at that is actually in just the listening to what your instincts are telling you in the moment. When you can let go of the ego of, I just want to be the coolest counselor here, or you let go of the imposter syndrome of am I the one to really be able to lead here? You and just listen to be well, what is it that this cabin needs right now? Oh, they need a joke. Got it. Oh, they need a serious conversation. Got it. Oh, this kid needs a high five or a dap or a hug. Got it. That's there's I think that what I have learned about being a good counselor is in all of the time it takes to figure out what it is you should be doing, not actually all the things that you do. And I think at TL in particular, I've just got a great legacy of incredible counselors, right? I can think about the counselors who I am listening to in my head as I'm counseling other kids, right? When I'm thinking about being like loud and making a scene of things, thinking about like an Ian Sims, right? Or like a Mojo, who were just like these larger than life, like, oh, I want to be just like you kind of guys, right? And then I remember like a Stu Reed who was just like, yeah, we at the farm. Like, this is what we're doing. Just chill out, weed the garden, right? Or even like a Farmer Josh who's just like, chill out. We at the farm. This is what we're doing. And I think, you kind of pick up what they're doing. It's just kind of like what their instincts are telling them to do. And then you can play them like cards in a game whenever you're engaging. It's like, what is it that's being asked of you? What's needed of you? But I also don't think it's hard. I don't think it's hard work. I think it's work that requires energy. But I don't think it's hard to be a good counselor because, like I said, like it's something that we know how to do. I think we're built to mentor, to rear, to grow things, to grow people.
So this season of the podcast, we've been talking a lot about impact. And when I hear you talk about your impact, I love asking people, what are you proud of? It's a question most people don't get in life. And to be able to give a platform to say like, nah, like flex, like what was the thing you're really proud of? I just love doing that. And there's a through line, though, that I'm starting to hear when I talk to different people. By the time this interview comes out, people would have already heard the Jay interview. And we talked a little bit about like the impact of the design of the lands and of our structures and how it supports and holds community. And I just had a conversation with Scoder that'll come out in a later podcast about the Pathfinder, about how Pathfinders at Timberlake don't put their names on the project, right? It's something that reverberates through time. And you talk about these little things that you built and brought to camp that people don't remember the name of, but it still reverberates through time. And I remember that from my early years as a counselor, because I can also point to things that like, y'all don't know where that came from, but like, I know where that came from. And I think so much the story of Timberlake and Farm and Wilderness, it is the structures and how they are built, right? It is the rhythm of the day. I think a lot that like someone at some point decided we were going to do family style dining and we just keep doing that. That was an intentional design choice. And so I want to shift gears a little bit to this idea of design intentionality. I think that is part of your magic that you have brought to camp over the last few years, is this outside work that you do that you have gifted back to us. So I want to spend a little bit of time here talking about this. And so for folks who have no idea what you're doing outside of camp, let's go there for a little bit. What has been some of the big work, your big life work you've been doing outside of camp? Tell us about that.
Oh, great. I'm really grateful to be able to talk about it in this context. In the context of it being a gift, I think, because it does feel like that. I run a social impact consulting firm called Kindred, or the Kindred Company. Our tagline is we do the work to make sure that people can live lives that they love and to make sure that the world will love them back. And it comes from really a collection of a lot of these really meaningful experiences and, frankly, like methods and frameworks that I've come across to really help shape what it means to be actualized, to be somebody who can be in pursuit of the things that you love, in pursuit of the things that you believe in, and the tools to really shape the world around you. There's a training I did a few years ago. So it was 10 years ago. God, it was 10 years ago. Where they talked about what does it mean to pursue possibility in the face of no agreement, which I think is just the reality that a lot of us are living in. And I, through my work there, have been really committed to actually creating opportunities for people, for organizations, for companies to say, great, I get that the world does not work the way that I need it to, or I get that this thing that we're doing does not work the way that I need it to, but what can I do to actually achieve that? And that's what our work is at the highest level.
I love this idea of creation and building, actualizing. What does that look like? What does that mean? What do y'all do?
Yeah. So we do 3 different kinds of design work. One of them is program design. So helping organizations really imagine what is the kind of suite of experiences, how are they stacked onto each other, and then evaluated such that you can deliver whatever your impact, whatever your outcomes are every time. We've done that work. Now we're doing that work from Wilderness right now in a number of different spaces. I'm sure we'll get into. We've done that work with the New York City Department of Education's Office for Students in Temporary Housing. Actually, is talk about gifting back, like dealing with more young people who are living in the shelter and trying to create programs and systems to support them in school and out of school. We're doing that work right now. Actually, we just wrapped. We did a project with the Office of Neighborhood Safety. We're doing another one with them now to help them build out entrepreneurship programs for families living in NYCHA housing projects. So programming, how do you actually create the collection of experiences and the systems to support them to deliver on those outcomes? We also do product design, which has been fascinating, I think, in the range of work that we've done, because when you're looking at product design in service of a better world, a better way to exist and to be people in this world, it means that a lot of the time you're actually breaking conventions around what it means to make good products. And that has been a fascinating journey for us to be on, because the clients that we're getting there are organizations or companies who are like, okay, we've never done this. We also don't really know what right or good looks like, but they're trusting us to really guide them through that. Right now, we're working on the revamping of the digital properties for this entire anti-racism network, and really trying to think through, okay, but what are people actually dealing with when they're looking for your resources? And how does that reflect how things show up on your website, which is a different way to approach like website design, or when you're thinking about information architecture and all of those pieces, because you're really centering the people in their experience first, and what it is that they're trying to do, not what it is you're trying to give them. And then the last one, which is a new area for us, has really been this service design work that we've been thinking about, which is, if you imagine that there are some organizations or some people who have these like multi-pronged ways that they're engaging with their customers or their clients. In there's a universe of touch points. How do you stitch those together so that they all feel like they are a part of the same cohesive experience? That's the essence of the kind of service design work that we do. And that work, I think, has the potential to really set the stage for what the future of our program and our product work looks like. Everyone that we're working with now is trying to balance all of these pieces of their business. You've got a summer camp, and you've got an organic farm, and you've got a web property, and you've just got all of these pieces. And to be able to support that organization in saying, you don't actually do 5 things, you do one thing. But what is the one thing, and how do the 5 things actually relate to each other, or become more than the sum of their parts in the work that you're trying to accomplish?
When you give your design work across each of those 3 categories, what does that look like? What is your process, right? What does it mean to design something?
At its core, design is about it's about intentional decision making. Right? You design your outfit every time you get dressed. Sometimes the intention is to be unintentional, right? But design is really about, how can you say that you put something somewhere, you started something some way, you colored something some way, for a reason. And my work a lot of the time is leveraging what's called human-centered design, which is, if you take intentional decision making, it's like for the right people in the right way. It's really the next level of that. And so in all of our projects, we start the same way. Who is it that's going to be engaging with this thing? What do we know about them? What do we need to know about them? What is it that they need? A lot of times clients are like, oh, didn't realize we needed to spend so much time talking about who is going to show up here. I have this proposal for a project that I need to have delivered, or a program that they're asking me to ship. And it's like, okay, great, got it. Who's going to be there? And getting that really, really clear. And then employing a lot of, and I'm standing on the shoulders of design strategists who have been doing this work. Design strategy as a practice is still pretty nascent, but I think relative to like finance, but like there's a lot of really great minds who've generated some great tools and methodologies that I'm employing. But I think the other thing that I'm really committed to is that my clients don't need me forever. You could very easily get wrapped up in a consulting agreement that's like, great, what's the next piece of work I can sell you on? What's the next thing that I can put on your lap or on your table? Or what can I build that makes you need to come back to me to build the next part of it? And I believe deeply in developing capacity within those organizations to do the work that I do. I have come into design work on my own. You can be formally trained in it, but I wasn't. I've done my own education on this. Frankly, you learn more just doing than you will in the classroom for this kind of work anyway. And the goal of the work that I'm doing now is to really set my clients up to have the capacity internally to do the things that I'm doing for them. So that means that sometimes projects take longer, because you're teaching and kind of bringing along and quality controlling, and they're also still requiring an output that reaches or meets all of their needs or requirements. I think that what that has done is created a different level of trust and a different level of impact that we can actually have as an organization, because now I can talk with the leaders of those organizations about, great, I've done this thing for you. Because we did this thing, I've left these tools in your hands. Here's a way to prioritize differently. Here's a way to research differently. Here's a new structure for how you hold meetings. Here's like all of these things, this kind of suite of tools that they can now be using and redeploying against all the other things that they have to take on. And that feels really good to us, right? The idea, again, in order to make sure the world loves you back, the world needs to be set up to do that. And we spend a lot of our energy making sure that they have what they need to do that, to participate in that way. There's a concept called participatory design. How do you invite your users not to be people who you are just like picking the brains of, or even like watching and observing, which can be like a way to arrive at human-centered solutions. But how do you invite them to be equal partners in the development of what it is that you have going on? And in order to do participatory design really well, you have to, one, be able to support people in identifying what their genius is. And then two, equip them with the same tools and language that you're going to be employing to then do the work. So they may not necessarily be somebody who's spent 10 years doing design strategy work in the way that I have, but they are somebody who understands what I mean when I say things like a user interview, or when I say things like prototype, and they can then participate in that conversation with me equally. At the base level, like that's how we do the work on a particular project or program, for working on a product that we're building, et cetera. But at the higher order, we treat our clients also as those equal partners in what it is that we have going on. So I might have a point of view on what the approach to the work should look like, but I'm going to make sure you understand every step of what that means, and then also deliberately design spaces in there for you to go, no, this is for you to lead here. I'm going to set you up to actually run this piece of research or own this part of the project. It is like a pure integration of our teams, as opposed to a kind of, let me deliver a service for you, I'll be back in 2 months with your answer.
Everything that you just mentioned, what does that look like at Farm and Wilderness? You've had this amazing arc of as a camper and then go back as summer staff, and you now have a very behind the scenes part of Farm and Wilderness right now, which I think for some folks who know you as like the guy who sings at Trading Post Legends, like that is a total different space, but it's a space that you are also doing some incredible work in. And so what have you been doing the last few years with Farm and Wilderness with this design philosophy?
Yeah. F&W has received a substantial amount of our program design genius over the last 4 years. Wow. 4 years. The work with F&W, I think, really sits in two camps. One of them is like straight up program design. What Kindred has been supporting F&W in doing is in codifying and doubling down on what the foundational pieces of its magic are. So how do you move from this just happened to like, this is an intentional part of how our program is built and here's why it matters. And that's taken the form of doing the redesign of one of their programs. We're working on a few more of them now. It's also meant looking at their entire suite of programs and trying to examine what their outcomes are that they're achieving and setting them up to be able to continue that work on their own and telling the story of that over time. That's one piece of work, one camp of work. The other is in the strategy, like what is F&W's organizational, operational, strategic vision for the next few years, and how can the organization be supported in aligning its efforts in achieving that? A lot of that work has taken the form of things like Growing for Good, which is something that will be shared more publicly in a little bit, but it is the first time in a few years that F&W has put a stake in the ground around where it wants to grow and what it is committed to developing within itself and in the world.
So you're doing this great design work and you've been doing it for Farm Wilderness. One of the projects I want to lift up first is the Tamarack Farm redesign. Some folks have been deep in that, some folks not. So for your folks who are unfamiliar with Tamarack Farm, it is our teen program that recently was shut down post-COVID, and you spent some time to rethink it. What did that process look like?
Yeah, so we set up two teams. An internal team that was made up of F&W's marketing director, a former director of Tamarack Farm, a former staff member, and a former camper of Tamarack Farm. And we took them through a design process, which I'll get to in a second. But throughout that design process, we also had these great inflection points for an advisory board of folks who were alumni of Tamarack Farm, other former directors, parents, and even a couple campers to really weigh in on what we were finding as a part of the design process. The way the process was set up was that we first spent time in interviewing former campers and staff members from the last 10 years of Tamarack Farm to get a sense from them of what has been most impactful. What is the magic of TF that we want to be able to hold on to and carry into the future? We then took that input and actually created a couple different versions of what Tamarack Farm could look like. Not necessarily to change the program, but to put in front of families, now, here's what we could do with this program to get a sense from them of what feels most compelling in the kinds of changes that we could make. Out of that work, sourced this idea of parents wanting something that was more immersive, parents wanting something that helped to provide their campers with skills that they could transfer outside of camp. That's how we landed on this immersion project format for the camp. And with that insight, we then built out all of the systems and structures that would need to be included in order to deliver on that kind of an experience. Sometimes when you get these redesign projects, they're like, take it to the bones and throw everything out and like, give us a new whatever. And it's like, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you actually just need to reposition it. Sometimes you need to add some new things to it. It may not always be about undoing all of the stuff that had been there. When I think about the Tamarack Farm work, I think a lot of what we did was actually go, well, when you like get under the hood and like start to look at where and how certain practices that were for its better or its detriment were coming from, understand why. Get to the bottom of the intentionality behind them. And once we got back to the intention around, the point is to create a transformative experience for teenagers. It's like, okay, it's not to do whatever some person said a couple years ago or to this random one line that showed up in a director's report from a decade ago. It's like, well, but why? What is the point of it? And once we got to that, we were able to build a version of Tamarack Farm that looks very similar to what it used to be. But the small changes that we made in service of the intentionality around transformative experiences for teens are what make it now a more successful program. It was about that F&W line, traditions that guide us but don't bind us. And if the tradition is to be a meaningfully impactful moment for these teenagers, right? Not that the tradition is to do town meeting in a specific way or to have chores happen in a specific way. But to get to that point, I I think is what's been game changing. And when you put that in the context of, and the world has not created space for summer camp anymore. And teenagers are showing up at camp with totally different mindsets and totally different challenges. And their parents are trying to wrestle with different kinds of stressors around how their kids are being socialized or what their kids are being prepared for in college or beyond, right? Like all of those things, when you add those pieces of context to the intention of creating a transformative experiences for teens, you wind up with the kind of work that we were able to do with Tamarack Farm.
So about this other last piece, this outcomes work that we recently embarked on. Tell us about that.
3 years ago, started to look at each of the camps to try to understand what made them special. When you go through, I think of old interviews of folks from all of the camps, or when you look at the parent feedback surveys, or even when you just talk to people who have been a part of the community for a long time, you start to hear a lot of the same things. They say a lot of the same things. They say it in different ways. They're some people talk about it as feeling loved. People talk about feeling supported. People talk about opportunities to lead. People talk about opportunities to be in control. All of these things, right? They're flavors of the same thing. And so we kicked off this work to really dig into, for each of the camps, well, what is the nuanced contribution that camp is making to the folks who show up there? What makes them truly impactful? To do that work was in pure F&W fashion, a little bit of everything. We did a lot of interviews with current and former campers and staff members. We matched that with some academic research around some of the terms that were showing up, and really tried to codify for each of the programs the handful of things that they are doing really, really well for all of the kids who are showing up for their programs. What that's allowed us to do is, one, really honor the work that has gone into building these camps for the last 85 years. There is a few generations of genius that have gone into creating what it is that we now experience as a Firefly Saw or experience as a sand camp. And the outcomes work has given us an opportunity to give some language to that in a way that would help guarantee that we can continue to provide that into the future. We've also been able to, for the first time, as far as I'm concerned, really measure it and provide a point of view, not just of F&W is a great place to be but F&W is a great place to be for these reasons, and to be able to use that to position Farm and Wilderness to be an advocate for summer camp, to be an advocate for outdoor and experiential education in the education space in a way that will open the door for more kids to be able to be here, and also for F&W to continue to imagine new ways that it might bring what it has to offer to others in the form of new camps, in the form of new programs in the community and beyond. F&W for a long time has been we got it, we're good here. And now they can say we know why, in a way that allows them to offer as a gift to others, to their peer organizations, to families, to schools even, a point of view on what it takes to generate and create the kinds of experiences that they've been able to do for the last 85 years.
So I feel like I could listen to you talk about your work forever and ever, right? Going back to, I like hearing people talk about what they're proud of, but I also like hearing people who are just in their zone, who are just feeling it. They know what they're talking about. It is so evident that this is such a core part of you. And I see such an interesting through line between your time as a camper, discovering this place that you don't want to go to, that somehow you kept coming back to, that you found a spot there, and then coming back as a staff member to find where it's changed and not, and then build it in the way that you wanted to. And now as a staff member who has some kind of distance between your camp experience and early summer staff, really been able to see this design reverberating through time, even if your name isn't attached to it. And there's this through line of intentionality, right? Design implies, is, intentionality. So I'm curious if you've thought about that connection between these communities you've been in, the charter school, camp, these other things. How do you see all of that connecting to this work?
I've never tried to connect all of them, but I think you're right around intentionality. I think what I've learned from the collection of intentional communities that I've been a part of is that things don't just happen. Nothing ever just happens. Even the little like quirks, weird routines or whatever, like it's not just because. When you start getting into like designing systems of things, you start to recognize that every tiny piece of it plays a part. And when you have that realization, you have a different level of like care or stewardship over the things that you're a part of. And so when I think that the through line that you're identifying is true. And I think that I think the reason it all tracks or carries with me is because I feel accountable to it lasting beyond me, because I now understand like there's a reason why we circled up that way, or there's a reason why we had that weird clap thing, or like there's like all of those pieces that are in and of themselves like inconsequential, but I think together communicate that there have been generations of thought and care and intentionality that have gone into them existing. And for me to have collected and experienced it, to encounter it, I'm now accountable to steward it and for the next person to come in and take that on. When I think about why I now do the kind of work that I do at F&W, I think it's actually in service of the same thing. It's stewardship. I think it's about doing what I can to make sure that this lasts. And you may explore this in other places, or maybe we'll go down this path here, but summer camp is under threat. It is not as easy to make the case for why people should go. And it is not enough to me to say, you just got to be here to get it. And I don't trust that enough people will stumble into farm wilderness the way that I did in order to make sure. I don't trust enough people will do that to make sure that it'll be here for the other kid right now who needs to show up and have somebody greet him at the bus. I think as I have gotten older, I believe in magic. Like I believe in magic because I don't want to live in a world in which magic is not real. And like I believe that if I'm going to steward F&W, I have to be able to engineer its magic. Like, how do you make sure that everybody can have the same like transformative experience? And not the same in that they all do the same things, but that what it means is the same. What it shifts inside them is the same. And so the outcomes work, starting with the Tamarack Farm work, I think, but moving into the outcomes work, has all been this dance of, okay, but like what is actually making this really special?
I think that's a really good place to end. So, Chris, it's been really great chatting with you. Thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to have you back because we have more things to talk about soon for sure.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. Love this place. Always down to chat.
That was my conversation with Chris, our design consultant and former camper. If you'd like to register, apply for a job at, or just learn more, check out farmandwilderness.org. We're on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, where we feature staff testimonials. Thanks to our guest, Chris. Original music by Emmett Powers. Recording and editing done by myself. Thanks to everyone at Farm and Wilderness who helped make our summers possible. Our camp vocabulary word this week is something that happens at all of the overnight camps. Changeover. Changeover is the time between each session when only staff and a few full session, full summer campers are staying behind. Staff have the day off, so directors and other leadership staff play a big role in creating some special events. Campers at Timberlake will have ice cream for breakfast and usually do some big adventure in Vermont, the time of unique magic. And with that, remember, camp magic is real, y'all. Until next time.